Welcome to Property Showcase, the podcast that brings you closer to the service providers that can inform your decisions about how you buy, manage and research top investment opportunities. Be informed and become a better investor with Property Showcase.
Hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Property Showcase, where we give you the inside track on the investment opportunities, the people out there, the teams, the products and services that are going to help you make the most of your investment journey. And today is absolutely no exception. I'm Grace Ormsby and I am joined by the wonderful Tim Watson. Tim Watson, welcome to the show.
Great to be here again, Grace.
We have had you on the show recently. Some of you will remember we talked about building out the A-team and just how important that is. But you're coming with more insights today.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet, I know last time we spoke, it was all about building that A-team around you and how important that is to be successful. Today, it's all about rentvesting. And is it appropriate for you?
It is a pretty big topic, Tim.
Absolutely.
I think at this point in time, so many people are getting priced out of markets where they are wanting to be living.
Yep.
There's obviously a lot of concerns around rental prices as well, but we're going to get into that. Before we do, a few changes for you since the last time we did speak.
Very much so. So I think last time I was here, I had the great experience of partnering with Investicate, and particularly having Arj as a mentor has been absolutely amazing. Now I'm thrilled to say that I've actually started up my own buyer's agency.
Congratulations.
So, thank you very much. So brickstowealth is now up and running. And look, it's just wonderful to be able to then have that complete ownership of that client experience. So to go right from helping people build out a strategic plan through to doing all the data analysis and making sure we're investing in the right markets, all the way through to an end-to-end service. So look, it's wonderful to be able to, now look after clients across that full process.
That's so awesome. A big step for you, but it seems like exactly where the time is right. It's time to go. Correct.
And look, I know we've spoken about this in the past, that for me, having come from the world of being in corporate for so many years, my absolute passion has always been property investment. So to go from that through to get all that experience working with Investicate and now to full circle all the way to starting my own business is just a dream come true.
Well, it's so cool that you're now here sharing your insights with us. And as we just talked about, you've talked all around building out the A-team. So if you haven't listened to that, everyone who is listening along, make sure you go and do that. But the work you're doing now, Bricks to Wealth, rentvesting must be a topic that's coming up and being talked about, or we wouldn't be having this discussion here today.
Very much so. And look, today the plan is really to talk a little bit about what rentvesting is, what are the positives of rentvesting. Equally, for some people it's not appropriate and, there are some downsides. And then finally, just to touch on, if it's of interest to people, how do you take the next step?
Okay, so before we get into there, what is rentvesting? For those that are coming to this episode completely fresh ears, haven't really checked out many resources online, what is it?
The concept of rentvesting is where you rent in the area that you live. So it might be because you work there. There might be schools in the local area, but there's fundamentally a reason why you rent. And at the same time, you're then investing in other markets. So you're building out your own investment portfolio, but in other markets to where you live.
I'm curious, is it a concept that's becoming more popular in this day and age?
It's definitely becoming more popular. And I think if you think of realistically, if you live in Sydney, the chances of being able to afford your own home, particularly if you're in the younger generation, that's now out of reach for many, many people. And so still, there's a lot of people that want to build wealth through property investment. And so rentvesting really has become a good alternative for those people. And I think at the end of the day, the other key factor here is, rather than investing in your own backyard, when you look at the data, there's so many other markets out there that have really great growth potential. And so you can actually accelerate your wealth generation by investing in the right market.
So it's probably not a great thing for everyone to be doing, but there's going to be a cohort of people out there who it is perfect for.
Correct.
Who are the people that really should even be considering it in the first place?
Yeah. So look, firstly, let's talk about what the benefits of rent vesting are. And fundamentally, there's two key things that I want to talk about. One is the financial benefits, and then the other is lifestyle. So if we focus in on the financial benefits, as I just mentioned, that whole affordability piece and the ability to generate wealth quickly is a key factor. So, there's that example of Sydney. The chances are the only way many people would be able to get into the Sydney market is by buying a unit. And yet there's a lot of evidence out there that shows houses grow faster than units. Equally, you're owning the land, and the land is an integral part of that appreciation over time. Equally, when you own a unit, and I certainly know this from personal experience because it was the first investment I made, was it often comes with a lot of costs. So things like strata, insurance, all of these things can actually eat into or add to the costs when you're investing. So that's where, from an affordability point of view, there are so many other markets out there where you can buy a house in areas that have great growth potential. And so, by doing that, it can really help people fast track that wealth growth by investing in property.
And you mentioned before around schools or lifestyle, like work.
Correct.
That probably also factors in for people who are considering this.
Yeah, absolutely. So for some people, it might be particularly work-driven, that they have to live in a certain area, but it then comes back to that challenge of can they actually purchase a house in that area. So, lifestyle factors, whether it's work, being close to schools, if you've got children, these can all be drivers as to why people want to rent in a certain area, but actually invest in other areas. Equally, from a mobility point of view, sometimes you get moved around, and the reality is when you move, you might not want the hassle of having to sell your permanent place of residence. So that ability to rent in an area, invest in a different area, can actually add a lot of value.
We've talked a lot around the benefits, Tim. Are there any disadvantages or downsides that people need to be aware of? So they might think, this sounds like a great idea, but like every good investment decision, it needs to be, considering both the good and the bad of what could happen here.
Yeah, and look, the reason, or one of the primary reasons why rent vesting might not be appropriate for everyone is some people obviously like that stability of being able to own their own permanent place of residence.
The psychology of it.
Absolutely. So it's not right for everyone. For instance, if you know you're about to have kids, that stability can be really important for some people. And so that in itself is one big factor. The stability, for some people, just knowing that they own their own permanent place of residence is going to be a big driver for them. At the same time, when you are renting in a certain area, there are some things that are out of your control. So, for instance, you will be paying rent, and rents could be increasing. Now, you can mitigate that by choosing the right area to invest in. So if you've done all the research and you've found a market where there's very low vacancy rates, chances are your investment equally, as well as hopefully appreciating in value, is also going to enable you to actually have growing rents over time. And that can offset some of the rental increases that come with renting in where you actually live.
What about when people come to you to brickstowealth and they want a plan, they want to work out what they're doing, they're ready to invest?
Yeah.
How often do they come to you saying, I want to be a rent investor? Does that happen?
It's a great question. So as part of that initial discussion I always have with clients is about understanding their background and where they're at in life at the moment and what they want to achieve. So what goals do they have? And that might be equity over time. It might be passive income targets that they have. Clients can be very, very different. Some people already have their permanent place of residence established. And so then for that particular client, it's about generating long-term wealth and essentially wanting to retire earlier. I have other clients that come to me and they fit the profile of the rent vestor. A client recently lives in Sydney, they rent here, but they can't actually afford to purchase in Sydney. And so for them, it makes perfect sense to actually look for other markets outside of Sydney where they've got really good growth potential, And that for them is the best approach.
And we talked a little bit before about the psychological impact of rent vesting and how it doesn't work for people.
Yeah.
Are there people that come that haven't even considered it and you can talk them around to it or make them go, hang on, actually, this is a really viable strategy for me to be taking?
So most clients that come to me are quite open with regards to which markets they will invest in. Because fundamentally, one of the key things I'm looking for is evaluating very sophisticated data that shows which markets have the best chance of outperforming the national market. And the reality is Sydney, partly from a cost perspective, but also from a market potential point of view, doesn't fit the bill for most of those investors. And so that's one of the first steps I do. So firstly, I'll sit down with clients and go through a strategic mapping exercise. We'll look at what goals they actually want to achieve, and we'll actually work backwards as to how they get past most people get to 1 to 2 investments and stop. The whole idea of the strategic planning is looking at, to achieve their actual goals, what do we need to do? How many properties do we need to get to? And then that forms the basis right from the start. Then it's about really understanding which markets are most appropriate for them and why. For instance, you need to look at the supply factors, the demand factors, what infrastructure spend is going into certain areas, what are the vacancy rates like. All of these different factors will then help pinpoint which market is appropriate for each client. And it really does need to be an individual approach. And then essentially what I'll do is then work with people right from, once we've chosen the right market, using my contacts to find the right property within that market. And it's an end-to-end service all the way through to completion, finding the right tenant, and then beyond that. So obviously we've built a plan. I want to then make sure that I give my clients every chance of achieving their long-term goals.
How cool. There's obviously a bit of maths that would go on behind this, and you said it's individual circumstances. So we're talking ballparks here, but I am curious, and probably putting you on the spot a little bit here. When it comes to the maths of looking at rent vesting and whether it is the right thing for people, what are some of the things that you are looking to ensure are ticked off to go, okay, this is going to be not only viable but a strong option for you and your portfolio and your future hopes, dreams and goals?
Yeah, great question. So look, first and foremost, every time I talk to a client, I've got to understand what their capacity is with regards to investing right now. And for some people, they've already built up the great ability to put down a deposit, and that's the sort of client that obviously I can then help. And equally, there are some clients that unfortunately aren't in that position, and it's then about, okay, what do we need to do to help you get to the point where you've got the deposit to put down to achieve or get into the right markets for them. And look, the reality is there are so many different markets out there that there's so much opportunity. So you can then determine for each client what deposit have they got, what's their income capacity coming in. That then helps determine where that right market is and the right property within that market.
What about, speaking a little bit now as devil's advocate, have you ever seen anyone who did act as an owner-occupier that's then turned around and go, no, let's look at rent vesting instead? Is it usually that it goes, does it ever go that way? I feel like once people usually make the decision to start owner-occupier, they're set. They're not going to look again at rent vesting, but it is such an interesting market at the moment that I just want to throw that proposition at you as something that, is there a relevant strategy there?
Yeah, so I haven't had a client who is an owner-occupier and then decides they're going to sell that and just stick all the money into investment properties. What I think, look, it's a tried and tested journey. A lot of people get into buying their owner-occupier as their first port of call, and then they're looking at how to expand the portfolio through investments. And the reason is they want to generate long-term equity, a passive income over time, and that's ultimately to help them retire earlier so that they can then choose what they want to do with their time, whether they want to change career, play more golf. I think fundamentally, often people start with the owner-occupier and then move into investment properties and building a portfolio. For some people, that isn't an option. It's about, they can't purchase the owner-occupier within the place where they live, and so essentially they rent there. But they still want to build that wealth, and that's where rent vesting can be an absolute great way to keep building your growth over time. But also, I think one big benefit in rent vesting is rather than putting down all of your money into one particular place, you can actually spread your risk by investing in multiple different markets, multiple different price points. The diversification play that comes from that can be really, really important. And equally, if you are building a portfolio, it gives you multiple income streams over time that helps you to get to your passive income target that most people are aspiring to.
It's a good point. So, Tim, for anyone who is thinking about rent vesting, who is looking at it going, well, I'm already renting, I might as well start investing as well. Yeah. Or maybe he's a little bit more mature in their investment portfolio. Maybe they've got a couple under their belt, but now looking to take the next step. How are you able to help these people?
Yeah, so great question. Look, at the end of the day, I've talked a little bit about what Bricks to Wealth is all about. Fundamentally, my whole reason for getting into the buyer's agency space and property strategy space is I want to help people to achieve their long-term wealth goals and passive income targets. And so, as I mentioned, we'll start with the strategic mapping to help people really visualize what a portfolio could look like for them. Then it's all about really understanding the data about which markets to invest in and why, and if they have a particular preference for any markets. And then fundamentally, how I can help is through the contacts, help them by building the A-team, which we obviously talked about last time I was here.
Make sure you go check it out if you have not already. Go have a listen.
And so it's really, I know, and I experienced this myself as an investor, a lot of people are stuck for time, and as much as you might want to try and do it yourself, and no doubt people can do it yourself, if you can find the time, if you have the ability to get access to the data that's going to help you be successful, then by all means, that's a great approach. I personally was always time poor. I suffered from analysis paralysis, and it took me 5 years to actually go from that owner-occupier, which is how I started, through to building my investment portfolio. So really, that's where I think I can help. And for any of your listeners that are out there, obviously I'm very happy to catch up with any of them, talk through their individual circumstances, and explore how I can help. And if they'd like to get in touch, you can go to brickstowealth.com.au or contact me at tim.watson@brickstowealth.com.au.
We'll also include those links in the blurb below the podcast, so keep an eye out for them there. Tim, I think you probably won over a few people there with just the way you were talking about the position people find themselves in, that paralysis and just that indecisiveness or being too busy. There's obviously ways around that, and you are very much one of them. So thank you so much for sharing your insights today.
It's an absolute pleasure, Grace. There is one other point that I just want to make, and it's a key benefit of rent vesting. Obviously, we've all heard of leverage and the ability to use your leverage to get into the property market, the idea of you're borrowing money, but you get all of the benefit of the increase in property over time. One key thing from rent vesting perspective is if you're building a portfolio, then you have the ability to tap into any equity growth that you have from your first investment property. You can actually use that to continue to invest in subsequent properties. And the acquisition phase of building a portfolio is so crucial. The quicker you can actually start acquiring more and more properties, you then get that compounding growth over time. So, yeah, that's very much how I believe I can help those clients out there, is really taking advantage of that.
Well, there you go. If you have any questions, reach out to Tim. He is going to be able to help you out there. As I said before, the links are in the blurb below this podcast. Thanks so much for your time, Tim.
Thanks very much, Grace.
To everyone who is listening along, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Any questions, reach out editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Until next time, stay safe and well wherever you are listening from. Bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.